The first time KL tasted Earth, it was seawater and beer foam on a board that wanted to buck him into the Atlantic. Cameras blinked along the pier. A lifeguard with a dragon tattoo offered a thumbs up. A trio of senators in polo shirts waved from a rented cabana like kids pretending not to gawk. KL bowed from his board, wiped brine from the angles of his pale face, and felt every inch of the summer he had been promised. Waves, crowds, noise that welcomed rather than warned. For 2 months it held true, a parade of beach mornings and neon nights where the Empire's young prince learned to shout when the craps dice flew and whisper when the movie stars leaned in. Noah was the first friend who made him forget that everyone else thought he was a story. Noah drove too fast and laughed too loud and kept a flat black phone that he never let out of his hand. Sometimes it chirped in a pattern that felt more like code than ringtone. Sometimes Noah vanished into the back of a club to take a call and came back with his grin fixed a fraction too hard. KL asked him once what he did for a living. Noah said consulting with a shrug that looked borrowed. They met Sarah before KL knew the name. He saw her on a billboard for perfume on the Strip, saw her again in his dreams, as if the same photographer ran both. Dark hair, steady eyes, a smile like she was about to leave, and wanted you to say something worth staying for. He woke to the clap of waves and the steady thump in his chest and felt heat that had nothing to do with the Sunday. That afternoon, Detective Rains watched them from a patrol sedan parked half a block down from the valet stand. He pushed a paper cup of coffee against his jaw, cooled the ache that came when he clenched it. Rains knew Noah from file photos and wiretap summaries. He knew KL as the guest whose detail made embassies tremble. He had a folder at home that started with the death of his cousin 2 years ago in a gallery that sold artifacts which were not always artifacts. It held a receipt, a photo of a ceramic mask that changed hands in cash, and a toxicology report that had eaten a hole in him. The mask had not been clay. The mask had been grown, and the breath it released had been murder. Rains watched Noah clap KL on the back, watched them climb into the silver coupe, and swallowed the urge to follow with lights. He would be patient. He made patience look like habit. Night fell on the coastal road like lacquer. KL's detail took a different route at Noah's insistence. Just us, the wind, and the ocean, Noah said, and KL agreed because the car felt like it was part of the planet, engine notes blending with sea hiss. The second car, midnight blue, slid into view in the rear glass. Noah laughed and called it a friendly race. KL set his jaw and let the machine do what it wanted. The curve came quick. The guardrail flashed white. Noah's tire kissed gravel, skittered, then bit wrong. KL saw the taillights yaw, saw the impact as an impossible flower of sparks. He braked and swerved and still felt the physics of it pull him sideways into a spin that ended in a slam that made the stars blink. Silence arrived like judgment. KL tried to breathe and found that breath did not satisfy. Pain made a circle across his chest that cinched with every heartbeat. He crawled to Noah's car and knew before he touched the window. The airbag was soaked and still. Noah's eyes had the shine of glass that only reflects. KL shouted his name until the world tilted. Paramedics reached him while the smoke still tasted like metal. They cut his shirt with shears. A medic checked his neck and ribs and saw the bruise over the sternum spreading already. Seatbelt mark. No breath sounds on the left. They slid a needle into his chest to treat air trapped around the lung, released a soft hiss that felt like mercy, and got him on a monitor. The tracing on the screen stuttered low, dangerous, then plummeted. The emergency physician met the gurney at the door and kept moving. Ultrasound at bedside showed a pocket of fluid around the heart, black on gray where blood should not be. His blood pressure was falling like a stone. They cut down, prepped his chest, and opened the pericardium to let the heart move. Bright red poured out and pooled on blue drapes. The muscle looked wrong, not just bruised, but shredded where the steering column had driven him forward. They called the cardiothoracic team and the transplant coordinator before the nurse had finished reading his name into the chart. The embassy liaison arrived with 2 more suits and a short message with the weight of planets. Save him by any means. A second call followed from a number that reached across space. It added the same words, softer, more dangerous. The surgeon looked at the scan and then at the clock and asked the transplant coordinator again for options. The coordinator was already running, because Noah had been brought in 10 minutes earlier with injuries no one survived and a driver's license that checked the donor box. His blood type matched. His heart, embalmed in cold saline and electricity, had a window of hours. The organ recovery team took 1 hour to confirm brain death with 2 doctors and instruments, not with guesswork. Consent came from the registry and from a mother who could not make herself leave the hospital chapel. Cale's heart could not be fixed. The team put him on a machine that kept blood moving while they worked. They cooled the room. They draped him to the collarbones. They opened his chest along the center line, separated ribs with a retractor that groaned, and lifted the broken muscle from its cradle. The new heart arrived in a cooler that made the nurse cry without noise, because she had seen Noah's laugh that morning on the news. The surgeon placed the organ gently, stitched connections vessel by vessel, and told the perfusionist to start the flow back. The heart shivered, then took. For a long minute it needed pacing wires to nudge it. Then it found rhythm, strong and stubborn. They closed the sternum with wire, brought the edges of skin together, and left chest tubes resting like little sentries. In the surgical ICU, the lights were never dark. The first 12 hours were about survival. Cale was kept sedated and ventilated, his new heart monitored with a line in the artery and another in the heart itself to read pressures. Nurses titrated medications to keep the organ happy without drowning his own immune system in suppression. An echocardiogram showed good squeeze. They started steroids and a drug that told his white cells to relax. They watched his kidneys and his brain like hawks. The respiratory therapist weaned the ventilator over the next morning as swelling eased in his airway. He woke on the second day to the sensation of a tube sliding free, and a nurse saying "breathe in," a voice that made breathing sound like a promise. Raines leaned against a vending machine outside the unit and read a text that said, "Stay back," written by a number the department called Federal Friends. He stared down the hall where the CIA man had walked his captain away. He tried not to think about a gallery with a polished floor and a mask in evidence that had gone missing for 6 hours last year. He tried not to think about how every time he got close to the man who brokered those pieces, his files went cold at the same moment. A black SUV turned the corner. Cale learned what pain meant that first week. Every cough set fire under the sternum that wires now held closed. He hugged a pillow and breathed on command even when his eyes watered. The physical therapist came on day 3 and taught him to stand with sternum precautions. No pulling, no pushing, a slow rise like a tide. He shuffled to the door and back, a distance that felt like a mountain. The transplant team spoke about infection and rejection and months of medication. No surfing for many weeks, no heavy lifting for longer. Biopsies through a vein to sample little bits of the heart to make sure it was not being attacked by his own cells. He listened and thought about Noah. He asked to see Noah's mother, and the team said later, "Not yet, heal first." On the 4th night, he dreamed about Sarah again. In the dream, she stood in a gallery that smelled like dust and salt, one hand on a crate stenciled with a star. She looked straight at him and said, "Call me." He woke with his heart racing, and the monitors chirped until the nurse touched his arm. He apologized and asked for water, and then asked for his belongings. The nurse hesitated, then handed him a sealed plastic bag with his jewelry, and a small device pulled from the pocket of his wrecked shirt, not one of his, flat and black and warm, as if it had been waiting. It buzzed twice in his palm with a rhythm that felt familiar but wrong, the way a locked door looks like your own until you try your key. The CIA man came the next day with a smile that pretended to be respect. He asked gentle questions about the crash. Cale answered as if words were steps and every step hurt. The man did not ask about the device. Cale did not volunteer it. When the man left, a nurse with gray hair and a gold cross reached for the medication pump and said, "You should sleep." He closed his eyes, but did not give the device back. 2 weeks after the surgery, he moved from ICU to the transplant floor. He walked 3 laps a day around a hallway ringed with a mural of sunflowers. The nurses cheered when he hit 5. They taught him to clean the incision, to watch for fever, to keep the bottles of immune medicine on a schedule that would outlast seasons. His security detail scaled back to a quiet pair who blended with orderlies. The embassy sent fruit baskets and a letter that said the empire would cover all costs and then everything else. The surgeon sent him home on day 14 with a plan that listed each test and visit through the next month. The first time Cale saw the ocean again, 3 weeks after the crash, he stood on the boardwalk with a sternum still healing and a heart that was not born to his body. He felt it kick faster at the sight of the waves and the sound of hand drums on the corner. He pressed 2 fingers to his wrist and felt gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. Then his phone rang in a pattern he did not know he knew until it ended. He pulled the flat black device from his pocket and watched an encrypted message bloom like a secret. The sender wrote a time and a place and a single word: delivery. He looked up and saw Detective Rains across the street, hands in his jacket, eyes on the horizon as if that is where trouble lived. Rains did not look at him, not directly. Cale felt the new heart thud once, heavy as a gavel. He typed back 3 letters on a device that had not been given to him. The letters felt inevitable, ready. The cafe in the Marina District had wide windows and the smell of burnt espresso that Kyle didn't mind. The message had told him to come at noon, alone. His security detail had protested until he convinced them it was a harmless meeting with a business contact. He sat by the glass, sipping slowly, watching fishing boats drift in with nets slung like tired flags. At 12:07, a man in a windbreaker sat down opposite without ordering. His hair was shaved close, his eyes ringed from too many early mornings. He slid an envelope across the table. No greeting, no hesitation. Cale didn't touch it. "This was meant for Noah," the man said, voice low enough that only Cale heard. "But you have it now, which means you have his work." Cale kept his face still. "And what work is that?" The man's mouth twitched as if deciding whether to laugh or warn. "If you didn't know, you wouldn't be here." Cale took the envelope, felt the stiffness of photographs inside. He waited until the man left, then slipped out the back door, crossed the street, and ducked into an alley where salt-stained bricks kept the wind out. The photos showed crates stamped with imperial sigils Kyle recognized not from official trade, but from seizures his father's own customs agents had hidden from the press. The other images were of people: a warehouse manager in Lisbon, a dealer in Macau, a smiling woman lifting a glass of wine, Sarah. On the back of her photo, in block capitals, "Trust her." That night Cale couldn't sleep. The surgeons had told him to expect fatigue, but his mind felt electric. The heart beat steadily, but each thump seemed to carry weight beyond blood. He took the device from his bedside drawer. There were more messages now, some in code, others in plain language that hinted at shipments and handoffs. He recognized addresses in ports he had visited as a prince, never as a courier. Against all reason, he knew how to answer them. Phrases rose in his head fully formed, as though he had been doing this for years. 3 days later, he went to the address in the latest message. It was an art gallery tucked between a bookstore and a cigar lounge, its glass front painted over for renovation. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and solvent. A man with a pointed beard led him past half-unpacked crates. On a velvet-draped table sat something that might have been sculpture, except for the faint organic shimmer in its grooves. 2 days on the water, the bearded man said, brushing dust from the object. No customs interference, no detection. Cale didn't know what the piece did, but he felt a faint dread beneath his ribs. Noah's mother's voice came back to him, trembling in the hospital chapel. He was always helping people, but it scared me. He left with a manifest in his coat. By the time he reached his apartment, a message waited on the device. "Bring list. We'll handle it. Trust Sarah." The next afternoon, Cale met Sarah. She arrived at a quiet pier cafe in a slate coat, hair tied back. The instant he saw her, the world narrowed to the table they shared. She didn't waste time. "You're in possession of something dangerous," she said, sipping black coffee. "The question is whether you're running it or running from it." Kyle studied her face. "Why do I trust you?" She smiled faintly. "Because Noah did." She took the manifest, scanned it, then burned the pages in a tin ashtray. "You're not dealing with smugglers. You're dealing with a weapons network that dresses itself as an art syndicate, and they have imperial connections." Kyle felt the new hard hammer. "You think I'm working with them?" "I think you have access they'll never suspect," she replied, "and I think you've already been talking to us without knowing it." Before he could ask, she left no number, no instructions. Only a folded card she slipped into his palm, 3 letters in ink: CIA. 2 nights later, Detective Rains intercepted him outside a seafood market. "Odd place for royalty to shop," Rains said. His gaze flicked to the paper bag in Kale's hand, heavy with fish, or to smuggle. Kale sighed. "You follow me everywhere." Rains stepped closer. "Your friend was under investigation before the crash. His contacts are still active, and now they're calling you. You want to tell me why?" "I'm buying dinner." The detective's jaw tightened. "If I find your name on a shipment manifest, there's no CIA spook in the world who'll keep me from cuffing you." Kale walked away without looking back, but the words stayed. The CIA man from the hospital appeared at his apartment the next morning. He sat on the arm of a chair, arms folded. "You've been answering messages meant for Noah," he said, "and we've been reading every one. You're good at it." "I didn't intend to be," Kale replied. "Doesn't matter. The network trusts you now. We want you to keep them that way until we're ready to pull the whole thing down." Kale hesitated. "Why me?" The man's smile was thin. "Because nobody suspects the alien prince, and because, like it or not, you've inherited his work." Kale thought of Noah's heart beating under his own hand, of Sarah's eyes, of Rain's suspicion. "And if I say no, you walk away, and the next person they send might not care who gets hurt." By the end of the week, Kale was embedded in the same operation that had once hunted his friend. His days were split between recovery cardiac rehab sessions, slow walks by the harbor, and nights spent in back rooms, mapping routes, memorizing names. The CIA trained him in quiet sessions, how to keep his face still, how to signal with a touch of a glass, how to tell when someone was lying by what they didn't touch on the table. The first job came sooner than he expected. A crate in a Newark warehouse was due to be moved without inspection. His role was to be seen checking it, then signing off. The bearded man from the gallery was there, leaning against the container. "Didn't think you'd be back," he said. Kyle shrugged. "Some art's worth collecting." Inside the crate lay another shimmering piece, smaller but more intricate, its surface crawling faintly under the light. Kale signed the form, hands steady, even as his chest thudded. Hours later, he met Sarah in a parking garage and handed her the coordinates. She didn't speak, just touched his wrist for a moment before leaving with the data. The touch stayed longer than the warmth. That night, Rains was parked 2 blocks from Kale's building. His radio squawked with a dead-end lead, but his eyes never left the lobby. He saw the prince enter, saw the black device in his hand, and knew whatever game this was, it wasn't over. By mid-July, Kyle's days blurred into a rhythm where danger threaded neatly between checkups and therapy sessions. The hospital's cardiac rehab wing still knew him as the quiet foreigner with the careful gait and the scar that ran like a silver seam down his chest. 3 mornings a week, he'd walk the treadmill at a modest incline while a nurse watched his heart rate on a monitor. They'd test his blood, tweak his medication, and remind him sternly that the wires holding his sternum together still needed another month before they could take any real strain. But the afternoons belonged to the network. He never carried the black device openly now. It stayed in a concealed inner pocket, vibrating when instructions arrived. Sarah handled most of the direct intelligence drops, her appearances unpredictable but always precise, once at a flower market, once inside a cathedral, once in the back row of a matinee film where no one looked twice at strangers whispering. The more Kale played the role, the more he understood Noah's strange habits. The late-night calls, the sudden absences, the way he always knew which port inspectors could be persuaded with nothing more than a smile and a handshake. But he also began to notice the gaps, the silences in the messages, the coded phrases that didn't match the rest. Sometimes it felt as though Noah's heart skipped for reasons unrelated to exertion. One muggy evening, the device buzzed 3 short pulses, then 1 long. The code meant urgent, high risk. The message gave only a location, a warehouse district in Baltimore. Kyle took the train alone, hood drawn low, and found the building's side door unlocked. Inside, 2 workers were prying open a container. The lid came free with a groan, revealing a crate smaller than the others he'd seen, sealed in reinforced glass. The contents made his chest tighten. Slender strands of metallic fiber coiled like muscle, each faintly pulsing as if it drew breath. He didn't know the science, but his instincts whispered weapon. One of the workers turned. "This wasn't supposed to be here yet," Who signed for it? Kale met his gaze evenly. I did. The man's mouth opened, then closed. Then you better take it where it's going. Kale didn't argue. He loaded the crate into a van whose keys hung conveniently by the door, drove 3 blocks, then slipped into an alley where Sarah was waiting. Do you know what that is? She asked, eyes fixed on the crate. No, Kale admitted. Her voice was almost a whisper. It's a lattice nerve. Synthetic, but reactive to biology. In the wrong hands, it can overwrite the nervous system of any species with compatible bioelectric patterns, including yours. They worked quickly, resealing the crate and loading it into her vehicle. She promised it would be dismantled before sunrise. Kale believed her, though a sliver of doubt remained. Trust came easily when she was near, but his mind was learning to ask why. 2 days later, Rains made his boldest move yet. Kale was leaving a rehab session when 2 unmarked cars boxed in his security detail. Rains stepped out, badge in hand, looking grim. You're under suspicion of transporting restricted materials, he said. Kyle's security chief began to protest, but Rains cut him off. We have photographs, manifests, and a witness. Tell me now, what are you really doing here? Before Kale could speak, a black SUV rolled up. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, one flashing credentials too quickly for Rains to read. This man is under federal protection, the taller one said. Your jurisdiction ends here. Rains didn't move. You think you can keep him out of reach forever? People get hurt while you play your little games. Kale met the detective's eyes for the first time that day. And people get hurt when the wrong things are left in the wrong hands. The CIA operatives ushered him into the SUV. The doors shut, and the city slid by in silence. That night, the agency briefed him on the next phase, infiltrating a meeting of the network's higher tier in Buenos Aires. The cover would be art acquisition for a private imperial collection, a role Kale could play without raising suspicion. You'll have one local contact, the handler said. You already know her. Kale didn't need to hear the name. The trip came with logistical headaches. He had to clear it with the Imperial Embassy, arrange for a local physician to be on standby in case of complications, and adhere strictly to his medical restrictions. Air travel so soon after a transplant was risky, but the team secured a pressurized cabin with medical monitoring. Buenos Aires at night was all light and shadow. The meeting took place in a restored theater, chandeliers casting gold on red velvet seats. Kale moved among the guests, a glass in his hand, listening more than speaking. At the edge of the crowd, Sarah slipped him a folded program. Inside was a seating chart marked with initials, each one a node in the network. He committed the chart to memory, then excused himself to the balcony for air. From there he spotted a man near the entrance, watching him with cold focus. Rains? Somehow, impossibly, the detective had followed him across continents. Their eyes locked. Kale knew this was no accident. The detective had resources of his own, or friends willing to break rules for him. But before either could act, a voice behind Kale said, "You're on in 5. He turned to see one of the network's senior brokers smiling, oblivious to the tension. The auction begins soon. You'll make the opening bid. Kale nodded, heart steady but heavy. This was the closest he had come to the center of the web, and the first time he truly wondered if he could get out again. The auction began with champagne whispers and the crisp clap of the auctioneer's gavel. Kale sat in the front row, every muscle of his still healing chest reminding him to breathe evenly. Behind him, the air stirred with perfume and ambition. Sarah stood 3 rows back, angled so she could see both the stage and the exit. The first lots were harmless enough paintings, sculptures, rare books, but each winning bidder was also a name Kale had memorized from the seating chart. The network was testing the room's loyalty. Then the final item was wheeled out. A steel case, temperature-controlled, with triple biometric locks. The auctioneer spoke in vague terms about its cultural and biological significance. Kale didn't need details. He could feel the same unease as when he'd seen the lattice nerve in Baltimore. The broker at his side leaned close. "You'll open at 50 million. No hesitation." Kale raised his paddle. 50 million. Bids climbed, the room's energy sharpening. When it reached 100 million, the broker whispered, "Enough." Kale set his paddle down. A man across the aisle claimed the prize with a final nod. As soon as the gavel fell, Sarah slipped out. Cale followed minutes later, ducking through service corridors until he reached the alley behind the theater. She was there, already on her phone. "It's a neural toxin array," she said quickly. "Programmable. Delivery systems disguised as sculpture." "Where's it going?" "South Africa. We can intercept it at the port if we move now." Cale glanced back toward the theater entrance and froze. Rains stood under a street lamp, watching them. He walked forward, hands open, expression grim. "I don't know what the hell you're doing," the detective said, "but I know you're not the bad guy, at least not yet. Let me help." Sarah looked ready to object, but Cale spoke first. "If you want to help, follow the case. Don't lose it, no matter who gets in your way." Within an hour, the three of them were in a warehouse near the docks. The CIA team had set up portable servers, comms, gear, and a live feed from the port cameras. The container with the steel case appeared on screen, moving toward a customs checkpoint. "Your move," Sarah said. Cale picked up a tablet and tapped in a sequence he didn't remember learning, but his hands knew it Noah's muscle memory. Maybe, or something stranger. The container's paperwork rerouted it to a secure inspection bay staffed by CIA operatives posing as customs officials. 15 minutes later, the feed showed the case being wheeled into evidence storage. No alarms, no struggle. The network would think the shipment delayed, not stolen. The operation's end came in pieces over the next week. The seating chart Kyle had memorized led to simultaneous raids in 7 countries. Dozens of network leaders vanished into custody. The Empire's foreign ministry sent a quiet commendation to the CIA, pretending not to notice its prince's role. Rains met Cale one last time on a bench by the harbor. "You saved a lot of people," the detective said, "but if I see you near another crate like that, I won't care who you're working for." Cale nodded. "Fair enough." He offered his hand. Rains took it, and for the first time, there was no suspicion in the detective's grip, only a kind of grudging respect. 2 days before his return home, Cale walked the beach at sunset. The surf was calm, the air salt sweet. Sarah joined him without a word, matching his pace. "When you leave, this work doesn't end," she said. "I know." They stood in the wash of the tide, letting the water cool their ankles. She reached out, resting her hand lightly against his chest. "That heart saved you," she said softly, "and it saved more than you'll ever know." He covered her hand with his own. "It was never just mine." The next morning, the embassy car took him to the spaceport. His sternum had healed enough for him to travel without the medical team hovering, but the doctors had sent him home with a strict plan-light exercise, daily medications, monthly checkups for the first year. Recovery wasn't a finish line, it was a road. As the shuttle rose through the clouds, Cale looked down at the curve of Earth's coast, glittering in the dawn. The summer he'd imagined waves, neon, crowds was gone. In its place was something heavier, sharper, but no less alive. He had arrived on Earth a prince chasing leisure. He left carrying a mission, a memory, and a borrowed heart that had taught him how to love, and when necessary how to kill. And both, he knew, had their time.